It's time for the July garden tour here in my Northeast Ohio garden. Won't you join me this evening? Garden friends, my name is Alexa and I am a home gardener in Northeast Ohio Zone 6A. I've been gardening for the last 8 years, started as just kind of a hobby and has evolved into quite the lifestyle. And here in Northeast Ohio, I live with my family of 4 on our 2.5 acre property where I try to grow a lot of our own produce given our busy life. While the garden is super important, it's not the only thing that I have time to do, but I do make it as much of a priority as possible to spend as much time as I can in the garden, especially in our summer months, because it is important for me, for my family to have fresh, locally grown food. And growing it myself ensures that, one, I know what's on it, which is nothing because I don't use any type of pesticides or harmful chemicals on my plants. And 2, I know it is the most freshest because I literally go outside and pick it and then we eat it that day or the next day. So I hope you will come with me this evening as we do the July garden tour of 2023. I have my harvest baskets here with me because as we walk through the garden, I'm going to be harvesting the different veggies that are ready for picking. Throughout the way, I will show you different varieties that I'm growing. I enjoy growing a lot of very unique, rare heirloom varieties of veggies, as well as many kinds of flowers, and I'm just really excited to share with you all the July garden has to offer. It's a very special time of year, and I'm just trying to soak it all in as much as possible. So thanks for being here, and welcome to Bloom and Wilt Gardens. Today's garden tour, I'm gonna start off with walking you through the rows of tomatoes. I've got 2 40-foot rows of tomatoes here growing behind me, and I'm growing about 21 different varieties of tomatoes this year. Some are heirloom, some are market varieties or hybrids, but I like to grow a wide variety of tomatoes. And this year is the year of the dark tomato, where I'm growing about 10 different varieties of dark purple tomatoes because my preference and my favorite are dark tomatoes. Many of these tomatoes I've grown in the past, but about half of them, they're brand new to me. And for the last 2 years, I have done a tomato review series where I taste test all of the different tomato varieties that I've grown in my garden. I think I'm up to like 50 different varieties of tomatoes that I've grown in the last several years. And that review series has all of the opinions and flavors and colors and shapes and sizes of these different kinds of tomatoes. So I will be doing a 2023 version, but if you're looking for some new tomatoes to try, I recommend you checking out that tomato review series, and I'll make sure to link it below so you can check that out. So you may notice my tomato trellising system is a little bit different. I like to use T-post, rebar, and string to support my tomatoes. I don't really like to use cages because one, I grow a lot of tomatoes and buying that many tomato cages would be very expensive. And two, I don't think tomato cages are really the appropriate tool to support a very large, indeterminate tomato that has lots of branches and stems and all that good stuff. Plus they get over 6 feet tall in some cases. And by using the 7-foot T-post with a 10-foot rebar going across, I can tie strings to each one of these posts and train my tomatoes to crawl up the string, and therefore better supporting them, maintaining proper airflow, and keeping my plant off the ground. If you want to know more about how to string tie your tomatoes, check out my How to Trellis Tomato video. You can do this in just 3 easy steps. Here we have the indigo apple tomato, still very small fruits yet on most of my tomato plant. This is the Cherokee purple. So far the biggest fruit on my black beauties. Big Mama, which is a paste tomato variety. This is the Berries Crazy Cherry. It makes these huge clusters of light pale yellow tomatoes that remind me of white grapes. Pink Bumblebee Cherry Tomatoes. Sun Gold Select Cherry Tomatoes. The Sun Gold Select was my first ripe cherry tomato to pick this year. And eating that first ripe tomato of the year was amazing. I picked it in the middle of the day, so it was nice and warm and sweet, and I've just been waiting for more to ripen. That one there on the vine doesn't look quite ready, so maybe tomorrow I'll get another cherry tomato snack. Black Strawberry Cherry Tomato. Chocolate Pear Cherry. Looks like there's one that's ready. Moment of truth. So it's a nice, sweet, rich flavor tomato. Dark tomatoes are just so savory. There's a very distinct difference between a dark tomato and a red tomato, where the red ones are just like a lot more sweet, the dark ones are savory, but I just think they're so delicious. Can't wait for more to come on. This is my favorite tomato, the Black Seaman. This is the Sart Royaliste. It'll be a dark purple and yellow tomato. Black Crim. Mrs. Maxwell's was recommended to me by a viewer from one of my taste test review videos, and this is going to be a large tomato, and it's my first slicing tomato that is blushing, so I am very excited to see this coming along and growing so well. In here is the Thornburn Terracotta. These were seeds gifted to me by John Jude, and the plant's doing really well. It's got tons of fruit on it, and it's been very productive so far. So this next batch of tomatoes, a little more tricky to get to because I'm competing with my rows here of red potatoes that have gotten so big. So we're kind of shimmying our way through the tomatoes here. Castelluto Genovese. I love these tomatoes because because of their fluted ridges, they are so very pretty when they're fully ripe. Black Brandywine. Here's a much larger one. These are marked as Dark Galaxy. Now these are seeds that I would have saved and replanted, and the fact that they are looking fluted makes me wonder if my Dark Galaxy cross-pollinated with something else, which if it did, that's totally cool. I like to see what kind of fruits I get, but I'm just noticing my Dark Galaxies looked shaped a bit differently this year. And those are all of the outdoor tomatoes. So now I'd like to walk you through my in-ground garden greenhouse where I am growing tomatoes and peppers and also green beans. All of the plants in here I was able to put out the last week of April, which was about 3 weeks before our last frost date here where I live in Northeast Ohio, Zone 6A. What's great about having this greenhouse is it offers me season extension on the front and back end of our gardening season. So I'm able to get plants in the ground about 3 weeks earlier, and I'll be harvesting tomatoes and peppers in this greenhouse all the way through the very end of October or early November. So having this has definitely been very helpful on getting harvest of things earlier and longer throughout the season. So after showing you all of the tomatoes in the outdoor garden, I want you to notice how much larger the tomatoes are that are grown in this greenhouse. And part of the reason that these tomatoes are so much larger is also because my chickens slept in this through the entire winter. So for about 6 months, this was my chickens' coop, and they fertilize and scratch this whole area up real nice, and it results in very productive plants. All the tomatoes I'm growing in here this year are the Trip L crop variety. I grew these among others last season, and the Trip L crop did the best in the greenhouse. It gave me very large red slicing tomatoes, and it seems this year we're following suit pretty well. Earlier in the season, I had a lot of fruits develop early, and then as temperatures started to climb, I noticed since it gets very hot in this greenhouse, I've had a lot of blossoms dropping and fruits not developing due to the heat. And as I have been watching this, I see more blossoms drying out and fruit not developing as we go up the plant. Now last year I didn't use any kind of shade cloth in here. It does get very hot. It probably gets close to 95 to 100 degrees here. I do have good ventilation with a door here in the front and a door in the back. So I get a really nice cross breeze going through here to help keep this ventilated, because this corrugated plastic, it doesn't roll up or anything. This is a completely enclosed structure. Seeing that it must be getting hotter in here this year or something, and fruits not developing towards the top, I'm thinking maybe I need to invest in a shade cloth for next year to support getting more fruit production throughout the season, because while it's great to get fruit really early, I want it to keep going throughout the season. So I'm going to keep watching this and seeing what we can do to ensure we're getting more tomatoes growing. I'm also growing some green beans in here. So these are the Maxibel bean. It's a French long green bean. And it's a very nice flavor of bean and not too stringy. I've pretty much enjoyed eating these. This is a bush bean. Now I also have some kind of mysterious pole bean growing in here, which I didn't intend to grow pole beans, but something got mixed in the bunch. And so I have this pole bean that has like gone all the way to the top here of the greenhouse. Looks like it's starting to set some fruit. So that's been fun to see the pole beans climbing up the tomato plants. There's a lot here. And then back here I have the Royal Burgundy bush bean. This is a purple bean. They are very beautiful. And I very much enjoy growing purple beans just because they are unique. They add some variety and color to the bowls. And they have been very productive. I have done one picking, but let's go ahead and do another picking of the green beans together. As I was picking beans, I was reminded that I have one other plant variety growing in this greenhouse. So back here, behind the tomatoes, I have a cucumber plant growing. And again, it was an experiment to see how early could I sow cucumber seeds and see them produce. And I forgot that it was back here because it really blends in with everything. But the plant has a lot of blossoms on it. And it looks like we have some little baby cucumbers starting to develop, so that is pretty exciting. Looks like it is also trying to support itself by climbing up the tomato. I wonder if I can get it to attach to this pole without breaking it. Maybe. Hold on, guy. No. So I'll just keep trying to train that to go up and attach to these poles and whatnot. It's a jungle in here. So on the other side of the greenhouse are pepper varieties, and these were also planted. These were planted, I think, the first week of May. And here we have ghost peppers. So these are the smallest of all the peppers still. You know, these are the hottest of the hot. So these just take a long time to get going. And the white powder on all these plants is diatomaceous earth. I put that on the plants because I have an aphid issue here in this greenhouse. You can see aphids on the leaves. So the diatomaceous earth is helping to kill off the aphids in an organic way. The plants that I have producing some peppers for me are these purple cayenne peppers. So those are still very small, but they're coming on nicely.
He likes your beans.
Is he eating a bean? Are you eating a bean? Are you eating a bean? Little Cosmo. Is he actually eating it or is he just chewing on them?
I don't know, you may want
Are you just chewing on my beans? What are you doing?
He's picking them up.
No beans. You can't have them. No. No. Oh, good boy. Oh, good boy. So it looks like I have some Carmen Italian peppers starting to produce. Here's some little habanadas. I'm really excited about these ones. These ones are called gypsy peppers. It's a hybrid variety, but these were the first to produce and they are very large already. And I've got a couple plants in here, so I am very excited to see how well these are doing. Got the shishito peppers coming on well. And then I have pumpkin spice jalapenos and lemon spice jalapenos. So the pumpkin spice will be orange, and these were gifted to me by my friend Sarah. And in exchange, I gave her a lemon spice, and these ones will be yellow. And last year, the lemon spice were my husband's favorite. I also had to stake up all the peppers because they were all flopping over. So I noticed with the peppers that are growing here in the greenhouse, their stems are weaker than their outside counterparts. And I attribute that to it just being less wind resistance in here. There's nothing from the natural weather conditions in here to force the stems to be stronger. And therefore they're just a little bit more floppy. And so a lot of these fruits, plants, once they started to get fruits on them, they were all flopping over and starting to grow sideways, and I really needed to get in and get these all staked. So these are just furring strips that we got from the local box store. My husband and I cut them into 3 pieces, and then I just used a mallet and hammered them in and used some twine to secure the stem of the pepper plant to the post, and these are working really good. I was looking to buy like the green plant stakes that, you know, they're just like green posts that are intended for this purpose, and I was seeing like a 4-pack for $10, and I needed over 30 different stakes, and I'm like, I'm not spending that much money on a plant stake. So using these furring strips, we got 10 strips, and I think they were like 8 feet each or something like that, and it cost like $10 or $11, and I got all 30 plus of my pepper plants in this greenhouse staked for $10 versus buying those plant stakes. So kind of like what I did out there with my tomatoes, how I string tie my tomatoes versus using cages. You know, same kind of idea with these peppers and using furring strips instead of buying specific plant stakes, because anything that's marketed for gardening is going to be way more expensive than if you try to rig up some other method yourself. So using these different hacks and things can save you a lot of money. Going to a garden store in the garden department and buying things specific for gardening, gardening stakes, gardening cages, gardening trellises, all of that is going to be way more money than if you find different materials to do the same thing, which typically cost a ton less. Okay, so we got our peppers, and let's move on to other areas of the garden for this tour. So back in this area, I am growing a popcorn variety called Uncle Jim's Popcorn. I was involved with a plant sale and seed swap earlier this spring, and a couple did a seed exchange with me and gave me a popcorn called Uncle Jim's Popcorn. And so that's what I have planted in this space. So it's gonna be news to me to see what Uncle Jim's Popcorn actually looks like. And then on this back row here, all the way to the back of the garden, are white potatoes. I think they might be the Kennebec variety. They were potatoes that we grew last year, and we had a bunch left over, so I went ahead and replanted those. Growing potatoes is really good because usually you're not going to eat through all the potatoes that you grow, or you can plan and set some aside and let them sprout and then regrow them the next season. And that's just one way to keep multiplying your potato growing stock, is by replanting the ones that you harvested the last season. I'm attempting to grow some different kinds of melons again. I've got cantaloupe and Kajari melon, and over here I have the black diamond watermelon. And so far the plants are looking pretty good. I mean, they are slow growing. Our temperature high is about 80 regularly, so it just really doesn't get very warm here for melons. Got some volunteer ragged jack kale growing here next to the melons. And so melons have been one of those crops that I have struggled with. One year I was able to get some Kajari melon, but I think I only harvested like 2, and they were still very small. I think it's just our environment here in Northeast Ohio. It's just not quite warm enough for successful melons. I have heard people that do melons, but I have not been one to really figure out how to master the melons in our colder environment. Even though it's still very hot and humid, it's not like the South. So I am waiting for all of these flowers that I put in next to my greenhouse. I've got zinnias and marigolds along here, among a bunch of like grass and weeds, of course, but once these grow and pop, they're going to be really nice. So I have a bunch of flowers to come over here, and flowers to come over here. So I imagine this whole greenhouse space just being very lovely and surrounded by flowers. Well, I do have some marigolds starting to bloom. In this back part of the garden, on this trellis, I've got cucamelons, little tiny cucamelon cucumbers, These have also taken a long time to get going. They're very heat loving, but they are starting to climb now, so that's a good sign. I also have another variety of cucumber back here. Can't remember quite what it is, but that one's taking off very quickly. And on the other side of this trellis is a jelly melon. I tried growing a jelly melon last year. I got a lot of foliage but no fruit, so I'm trying again before I write this one off. But this is something else that's very heat loving. And for anyone who has been wondering about my culantro, I think this may be culantro seedling. I took a little piece off the leaf to taste it to see if it tasted like anything, and it didn't. I've had these growing and I thought this might be seedling, but now as they grow I realize this is just a weed that I don't want in here. So my culantro experimenting doesn't seem to be going very well. I was really looking forward to having a cilantro alternative in the hottest part of the season, which is typically August through part of September for us. I don't think the culantro is going to work out for me. I grow my whole garden by seed, so I have a good success rate with starting plants from seed, as you can see from the garden around me. However, culantro has been a seed that has evaded me, and I haven't figured out how to be successful with that one. I've tried growing it in the house, I've tried growing it in my greenhouse, and I've tried direct sowing, and so far, zero I've had much luck with. So culantro growing tips, let me know. I'm not going to try anymore this season, but if I can get some help in the culantro department, I might try again next year. This is the carrot patch. We sowed this patch of carrots together a few months back. I'll post that video below if you wanted to see what this space looked like when we sowed all the seeds. It was very different. I mean, this entire garden area was completely blank and bare. We even did these potatoes together, so you can see in just about the matter of like 2 months how much the garden just changes. I'm looking forward to this sunflower. I have a sunflower grow here every year, volunteer. I never plant them, but it's always in the same place. I'm sure if you went back and looked at my garden tours from 2020, 2021, and 2022, you will see a sunflower in this specific area. And that just made me realize this is my fourth season doing garden tours. That's crazy. So back here, I have finally gotten my metal raised beds filled. It took me a while to get to this point, but my sons helped me unload a yard of soil over the weekend, and I got these filled, but they have not been planted yet. Since I have such a large garden, I pretty much have everything planted that I could want. And I have started sowing seeds for fall, and I've done all the basics: the broccoli, the cabbage, cauliflower. I've done some radishes, I've done some lettuce. So any other ideas for fall crops for these? I was considering doing another round of carrots and maybe another round of beets. So maybe I'll do those in these spaces, but if you have any like really good suggestions for a fall crop that overwinters well, let me know in the comments below, and I will think about planting it in these spaces and share with you what I did in the next garden tour. So it is berry season, and these are black raspberries, not to be confused with blackberries. So I have a couple of these plants here, and then over here are the actual raspberry plants. And my son Anthony went through and picked a bunch of these already today, so there's not a lot of ripe fruit. But there's still some fruits coming on. The Japanese beetles are here, as you can see from the evidence. It's a nice berry. Between the Japanese beetles and my sons, I don't get a whole lot of berries. That's okay. I don't mind sharing with my boys. But the Japanese beetles, they are my nemesis. So I've got a lovely sunflower that bloomed. And this is one of the Steve sunflowers. So I'm just tickled with how big and beautiful this multi-headed flower is. Next to this dill. Giant mammoth dill, and it is giant. This dill is just about as tall as I am, and I'm 5'10". So the giant mammoth dill is definitely very big. Ooh, and it tastes great. So there's a lot more action going around in the circle garden this tour. I have a lot of zinnias in here. I sowed so many zinnia seeds. Japanese beetles are having a party on this specific cluster of zinnias, so I've just kind of let that be a trap crop, and they're mostly leaving the other ones alone. Giant volunteer curly dwarf kale, and I've got sweet potato vines, so I should have lots of good sweet potatoes growing. I've got these kind of interplanted all along. This is a called the Cardinal Climber. It is a flower that is going to climb up and devour this trellis, so likely by next month this trellis will be covered. And a few weeks ago we sowed jicama seeds, and I believe this is a jicama seedling, although I've never seen one before, but this looks different and it's in the right spot. And there's another one coming up right here. So I did sow a lot of seeds. Most of them didn't come up. Only, I think, 3 that I found came up so far. And I'm very pleased with how this bed is turning out. Usually when people walk through my garden, like my sons, they walk this way and then they would walk right through this bed. And I wanted to plant something really tall in here to prevent anyone from walking in it. And this is successful. I've got fennel growing in here, which tastes like licorice. And I've got a variety of sunflowers growing. And to my surprise, this is a volunteer squash plant that is growing underneath and doing very well. The bugs haven't found it underneath the sunflowers and the fennel. The onions are getting close to being ready for harvest. I trimmed the tops on all my onion plants, and so now I just wait for them to turn brown. This trellis here will be lined with the Cherokee Trail of Tear beans. So I heavily sowed them on this side because I want it to be very thick and covered, and they are coming in good. They're already starting to wrap around each other, which is to be expected with beans, but that's okay. So this bed got super weedy, and I recently completely cleaned it. Having a very good year with the lacinato kale, and there really hasn't been a lot of pressure on this kale, which is really encouraging to see. Not so much pests. I mean, there are some still, but usually by this time these would be, well, they would all look like this. And then same thing with these collards. I mean, they are taking a little bit of a beating, but the collards will definitely rebound in the fall and grow, and these will last through the winter. I also have a lot of ground cherry plants. So that's a ground cherry, that's a basil, ground cherry, ground cherry. They volunteered all over my garden, so I concentrated a bunch of them in this space. I also started to sow seeds for fall, so these little sprouts are spinach sprouts, And those came from seeds that I saved. I had a bunch of spinach all growing in this area, and then it bolted. They developed seeds. I let the plant just kind of dry out in place amongst all the weeds that were happening in here. And then when I was cleaning up the beds, I noticed, oh hey, look, I have all of these spinach seeds. And so I just kind of stripped the plant and just went like this, patted it in, and they have germinated. So letting your plants go to seed is very helpful. You can get more food growing fairly quickly. And that is the case with all of the amaranth around my garden. I grew amaranth last year, and a lot of these pink plumes all dried out and made seed, and the amaranth seed really spread everywhere. I've been picking amaranth seedlings from all over my garden, even places I didn't plant it. So this Love Lies Bleeding Amaranth is definitely a very ready self-seeder. When you plant it, you will find it in your garden forever, and I've found that to be true with cilantro. I just cut a ton of cilantro yesterday. Plants that have just sprouted up all over the place. Now they all went to seed, so they weren't good for eating anymore, but I cut them and I have them drying to save the seeds that were developing for coriander. So I think I've got a little cauliflower seedling right there. And this is something new that I'm trying. This is soybean, and I am growing these soybeans to harvest them young as edamame. So this is a kind of a new cool thing that I'm trying. I haven't done soybeans before. And lots of black radish seedlings all popping up. So I'm having a good cabbage year. This is the Copenhagen market cabbage, and I have struggled to grow cabbage for many years, and I think it's just because I was picking heirloom varieties that were just a little more challenging to grow. But I've been eyeing up this cabbage here, and it's nice and firm, and I'm ready to harvest that. We're gonna need a tool. My hoary knife. I keep my garden tools in this mailbox so I have easy access. This is the prettiest cabbage I think I've ever grown. So I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna do with this. I already have a gallon of sauerkraut that I made out of red mustard greens in my refrigerator, and it's like taking up the whole fridge. So I'm gonna have to come up probably with something else for this cabbage, maybe just cooking it. Most of my family does not care for cabbage, so I could also do like a coleslaw maybe. I'm gonna have to get creative on how I want to eat this big cabbage, knowing that I've got several that are also getting very close to harvest. But it's just so pretty. And since I'm in harvesting mode, I've got a bunch of rutabaga that are also very ready to be pulled up. So the rutabaga plants here behind me, I only have a couple, but the cool thing about these plants is that I didn't plant them at all. They planted themselves. I had rutabaga growing in this area in 2022, and I let the plants go to seed. I saved a lot of the seeds, kind of shook them into a bowl and saved them. But naturally, a lot of those seeds fell to the ground on their own, and this spring they grew plants. If at all possible, with every single plant type that you're growing, at least leave one or two of those plants and let them go to seed. And even if you don't collect the seeds yourself, they will naturally just fall to the ground and likely sprout next year. It's really cool to get free food that way. And even if you see seedlings growing and you're not exactly sure what they are, like if you didn't remember what you planted or just can't identify it, like I would just say leave them or transplant them to different areas and be so surprised on what kind of free food you get. I mean, it just helps the gardening experience. I think even if I didn't intentionally plant a garden, I would still get a lot of food because of doing this here in my home garden for several years. There's a lot of plants that just reseed and come back up on their own. And it makes my life a little bit easier. Oh man, I think I left this one go too long. Ugh, it rotted out. I should have pulled this one up sooner. Well, I didn't plant it anyways, so it's not too disappointing that I don't get to eat this one, but I have a couple others, so I hope at least one of them are good. This one is big. It looks pretty good. These are 2 huge rutabaga. I think only getting 2 to harvest is probably enough because this is a lot. Any good rutabaga recipes, drop them below. I've grown rutabagas before, and I did a whole video last year on harvesting rutabaga and some care tips, but I still really haven't found a recipe I love. I've tried the mashed rutabagas, I mean, and that's okay, but I'm always interested in trying new things. So any good rutabaga recipes, I am ready to try them. And as far as that other gross one goes, I'm gonna throw it to my chickens. I'm very pleased with how this flower garden has turned out. Right at my front entrance, I've got all kinds of carrot blossoms, which let your carrots go to seed too. I'm just gonna keep saying let stuff go to seed because it's so cool to see how different plants and root vegetables blossom, as well as getting the seeds when they're done being pretty. Here I have black bachelor buttons, sweet peas, impatiens, I have zinnias and chamomile. I have a morning glory growing up my front gate trellis, and amaranth. This whole front bed up along the fence line just looks really pretty. I'm very happy I put in the purple basil because it does help block off color. I kind of wish I did more purple basil. I might propagate that and sprinkle in some more purple basil. What are you? Oh, that's a weed. I definitely don't want to flower. But I was growing snap peas along the back fence, and it was really difficult to get to those after the potatoes grew. So I'm just letting the peas dry out, and I will save those seeds. I have this variety of Rudbeckia, I believe it is. It's really pretty. And then some kind of primrose growing up here. These potato plants have gotten huge. And then I have more of the red Burgandy and Maxibel beans up here, and it looks like there's some getting ready to be harvested up here. I did a succession sow, so these were done several weeks after the other bean plants, which is good timing because my other ones are about done. And so this will be the next wave. Oh, cool, my calendula. I don't remember what variety of calendula this is, but it's a more yellow color. And then back here is where I'm growing different varieties of squash. I have zucchini, a patty pan, tromboncino, delicata, and I think a butternut. Although something has killed this one off. I think it might be the squash vine borer because I haven't seen the squash bugs yet. There are eggs on here, but I don't actually see the bugs. So I think a squash vine borer took out this one, and I anticipate the rest will probably follow suit because I don't usually ever have a very good squash harvest. Holy zucchini! Cool! I definitely wasn't expecting to harvest zucchini on this garden tour, but now that I see that I have some zucchini, I'm gonna pick it now before it gets baby size. This is a really nice size zucchini, very manageable to cook with. I just knocked a squash bug off of this one. This is also a very nice zucchini. Very firm, good color, good size. This was a very nice surprise today. Well, I suppose now that I know the zucchini are producing, I will have to be checking those more often. I didn't think I had anything in there yet, but I was looking closer and it looks like there's some patty pan that are starting to develop, so that's good timing. At least I'll get some kind of harvest off my squash plants before they all get killed. So last area is my Brassica bed where I've got kohlrabi and broccoli and Brussels sprouts all growing in this area, and they've all been doing really well. I've got more carrot blossoms that I tamed yesterday and tied them up because they were like flopped over everything. And I'm attempting once again to grow a red cabbage, and these carrot blossoms were shading all of them out, so they're very small still. We'll see what kind of harvest I get off those. But I wanted to get this kohlrabi because this one's getting pretty big. Kohlrabi is such a unique veggie. I mean, just the way it grows, it's really cool. And it tastes good. So a lot of people I know are not familiar with kohlrabi. Before I started gardening, I had never heard of it. I have never seen this in a grocery store. I've never even seen it at a farmer's market. If I did more farmers markets, I would probably try and sell kohlrabi just because it is very unique. What it tastes like is, if you ever eat the big green stem part of a broccoli, that's kind of what it reminds me of. It has a mild cabbage flavor, but it also kind of has like a sweetness and like a crunch like an apple. So usually when I'm describing it, I say kohlrabi is like this cabbage apple cross. How I use it is I will cut off all of the outside, so all the purple I take off because that part is tough, but inside it is a nice kind of pale green color, and you just can slice it and eat it raw like carrot sticks, or you could saute it. I cooked some kohlrabi the other day for breakfast and used that in place of potato, and it was very similar. Grow the kohlrabi! There's also a little bird living in this birdhouse gourd, and its babies were in here. Doesn't sound like they're in here now. They were in here yesterday, but I don't hear chirping. It's just like a little house wren. It's really cute. Now I noticed down here where I've got the rest of my gourds, which I have yet to hang up this year, I found this plant and this one here. And I was like, what is this? And I smelled it, and it distinctly smells like a gourd. So I think that these still had some seeds in them and they fell and they seeded themselves. So now I have birdhouse gourd growing over here, which is fine because what I planted along this trellis is not really growing. I put in this Malabar spinach a long time ago. It's not growing. It's a heat-loving spinach variety, and I think this spot is too shaded for it. So then I sowed more peas, which those are all sprouting. And now this birdhouse gourd is growing, but I'm just gonna leave it because I would like to see a covered trellis. My garden lights have turned on. So I did want to make sure I covered it in this tour. This area behind me, which is our future strawberry patch. My mom has been helping me out, and we moved a bunch of soil here this week, and she designed this space to be our new strawberry bed. I've been growing my strawberries this season in 5-gallon buckets, and they've been doing fine. The thing is, it just didn't produce enough strawberries for us. We like a lot of strawberries, and I wanted to be able to grow more. And so she made this 3-tiered bed here with river rock stone and bricks, and we will be transplanting strawberries here sometime in the next couple weeks. The garlic is getting very close to being harvested. I've pulled up 2 cloves already just to see how they are, and they are getting close. The tips of the greens have been turning brown, but there is still quite a bit of ways to go before I feel good about pulling the rest of them. There are some in here, like this one here is probably ready to be pulled up. Let's just see what we got. Oh, this is a red German, I think. Very nice. So this one was ready because, like, look how brown and dead that is. So I want to see more of the rest look like that. Cool. So I'm gonna set these garlic with this other garlic I've pulled up in my greenhouse and let those dry out. Told you I pulled a bunch of cilantro and I'm letting them dry. And these are more spinach seeds that I am drying, and these are onion tops that I trim back and I'm letting them dry in here. These actually feel very dry and crispy, and I'm gonna blend these into a powder by maximizing my space. So behind me here is our blueberry patch, and we have 19 good blueberry plants, and we finally got a harvest off them this year. I planted 1-year-old bare roots in the spring of 2021. That year nothing produced. In 2022 we got a couple berries, but I may have picked like 10, so those were very low producing. This year we've actually picked a bowl full of berries, and we're still picking off of them every couple days. So patience is a virtue when it comes to berries. You have to wait several years before they produce, but now that they're producing, I'm very much looking forward to all the subsequent seasons that we're going to be picking a lot more berries. I'm still fairly new to growing blueberries and trying to learn what works, what doesn't work. So last fall I did some amending with some soil acidifier to help fertilize the blueberries, as well as putting pine needles around each plant. I do feel like that probably helped. Now, only half of my bushes actually produced fruit, the other half did not. So you can see where I've got cages and nets around many of the bushes. The ones that don't have that is because they didn't produce any fruit. And so I'm not really sure why those ones didn't produce. It's just kind of strange. It's the same soil in all areas. So why half produced and half didn't, I don't really know. But I'm gonna keep trying to figure out. If you have suggestions about blueberries and like why only half of them may have produced, please leave me a comment and I will look into your suggestion to see if I can do something differently to get more berries next year. And then another update related to waiting years for something to produce. In the fall of 2021, my mom and I planted a whole hedge here. You can see these orange stakes, a whole hedge going all the way from the very back of my yard to the road of hydrangeas. And the idea was when these all grew up, they would all be producing these big, beautiful bushes of hydrangeas. So we waited and nothing happened last year. The plants actually looked like they were dying. And I really did not have much hope for these hydrangea bushes. They've been taking a very long time to grow. They were transplants that were separated from my mom's hydrangeas at her house, and a lot of them died out actually. Like this one here, the plant completely died out and we have to replace that one. But patience. A lot of things in the garden is patience. So I've got 2 bushes that did something pretty special. So these 2 bushes here produced blue flowers. So this tells me the soil on this side of the yard is more acidic because blue hydrangeas happen when the soil is acidic. The pink hydrangeas are when the soil is more alkaline. So now that I see I've got blue hydrangea bushes, I am even more excited for this hydrangea hedge. I love blue flowers and this is very exciting. I think I just spotted another flower. Huh. So I just found a pink one. So closer up to the road is a pink one. So it's very tiny, tiny plant, but that's exciting. I'll have a mix of pink and blue hydrangeas. Obviously it's probably going to take a couple more years before they're really nice and big and showy, but if you want good plants, you gotta wait sometimes. We'll talk about that in another video. I say we had a nice harvest of veggies tonight. Well, surprisingly, it's just about dark and time for this garden tour to come to a close. I hope you enjoyed walking around and harvesting our fresh produce from the garden this evening. I love this time of year where we can go out and pick something almost daily and have it for supper or breakfast. I incorporate veggies into a lot of my meals. I actually try and eat the most veggies for breakfast, with like eggs and a protein, mix it all together in like a breakfast bowl. It's great stuff. If you'd like to stay connected with me and see more gardening content, follow me on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and here on YouTube at Bloom and Wilt Gardens. And I can also be found on TikTok at Lex in the Garden. I share a lot of short form content on specific gardening tips about growing and harvesting and answering your questions. So if you have a gardening related question, drop it in the comments below and I will get it out on a short here soon. And if there are any topics that you would like to see covered in future longer videos, such as this garden tour, let me know what those topics are that you would like to see covered. And make sure to subscribe to Bloom and Wilt Gardens here on YouTube so you're notified when the next garden tour and helpful videos are uploaded. It's my pleasure to be able to share this gardening space with you wherever you may be in the world. Do something you love and have a good night. Bye.